Hi, I'm Katie Stamp, City of Huntsville Preservation Planner here in downtown Huntsville with Dr. John Kvach, Executive Director of Singing River Trail. We are so excited to have Dr. John Kvach here with us this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about his role in our community related to history and preservation as we celebrate Preservation Month and People Saving Places HSV. So John, tell me a little bit about yourself as far as how you got interested in the field of history and the work that you do here in our community.
Thanks, Katie. So for me, history has always been a part of who I am. I wanted to be a history professor when I was age 8. And in fact, I was for 20 years at the University of Tennessee and at University of Alabama in Huntsville. And for me, it was just a lifelong passion. Historic preservation is important because I feel like it's the soul of a city or soul of a town, of our community. And I just feel very passionately that what we have in Huntsville is so unique. We have 200 years of architecture, 200 years of stories, and 200 years of just people trying to make the city better. And so, you know, for me, it's been a lifelong passion and something that I feel is a very important part of our city.
Now, you serve on the Huntsville Historic Preservation Commission, and so I know you do work obviously with the preservation world with that. With Singing River Trail, what other areas, how do y'all pull in history and preservation into that?
So we have 8 counties worth of historic preservation. We have 8 counties worth of history. And for us, a town like Cortland or Leeton or Town Creek, some of these smaller towns have beautiful downtowns. And we want to keep that as a core part of what these folks are. Because when we get people on bikes and on foot going along the Singing River Trail, we have 225 miles worth of stories and architecture that we want to highlight for North Alabama. So it's not just historic preservation, it's also economic development.
Right, which I think is a great tie-in for what we're going to be talking about this month and with our People Saving Places HSV, not only downtown economic development, but how communities can tie in together. So I think what you guys do at Singing River Trail is really important, how you're connecting the whole North Alabama community.
Well, thank you. And it's something that I feel very passionate about, obviously because of my background, but the money that can be generated through these beautiful downtowns and the opportunities that can be created for people who live in these small towns is just, you can't measure it enough. And so for you all to buy into a regional vision like the Singing River Trail as a city is important. But I love that we're also setting the tone as a city for historic preservation.
Absolutely. So in your mind, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but what do you feel like the significance of Preservation Month? I know this is something that we celebrate all across the country. So for our community specifically, why is it important for us to celebrate that here?
I think it's important to understand that as we live through our lives, that the definition of history has changed over time. And it's easy to kind of stop seeing change over time and realize that there's so much history that surrounds us that hasn't been marked off or hasn't been acknowledged, that there's so much more to tell. And I think with Preservation Month, people like you are telling stories that remind us who we were. I just saw today that Reconstruction is now a part of our storytelling. Mm-hmm. And Reconstruction is a very important part of Huntsville's history, American history. So it's really gratifying to see you guys take it to the next level.
Absolutely, and I'm excited about hopefully the Preservation Month celebration will spread across North Alabama, and I know there are other communities that celebrate too, so that's exciting.
Yes.
So for you, do you have any, you know a lot about local history,
yes.
Like a lot. So do you have like 1 or 2 either historic sites or fact stories that you think we should bring more attention to, maybe things that people don't know about as much?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Reconstruction,
yeah,
I think has gotten such a bad rap over the course of history that people don't realize what a positive moment it was in American history for so many people. Mm-hmm. And for the city of Huntsville to begin to acknowledge it without being forced to, doing it in their own volition and doing it in a way that's meaningful, it makes me happy to be a part of a community that's taking the lead in things like history and historic preservation.
I completely agree, and again, it's like telling that full story.
Yes.
Stories that the history's been there, but just making sure that's brought to light is so important.
And I think when you look at something like Alabama A&M and where that came from, and you look at, across our town, there's this multi-layered historical narrative that I think we're now really getting down to: women's history, transportation history, all the things that make who we are. And, I know it's kind of trite to say, but from cotton to rockets, we have this long history of always looking toward the future. I think it's important, though, as we look toward the future, to remember the past.
I completely agree. And so for someone like you that's been doing this for your career the entire time, what would What message or advice would you give to young people who are maybe interested in the field of history preservation? Is there anything that you would like to share with them? Any advice or information that they would need to know to be successful?
So for me, realized as a history major, people always used to say, "Oh, what kind of job can a history major get?" I get any job I want.
Yeah.
Right? I can prove it right now. I'm the director of a 225-mile greenway system. And so I've been a history professor. What I'd say is if your passion is in history or historic preservation, don't let other people tell you what you can't do. I said yes to everything. If it was historic preservation, if it was interpretive, you name it, I did it. And all those yeses eventually added up to what I wanted to be, which was a history professor. And then when I felt like I had completed that task and I wanted to move forward, I decided I wanted to do something different, and my history degree allowed me to do exactly what I wanted.
Which I think is really interesting because you were talking about doing lots of different things, and I think people don't think about the field of history and preservation being that diverse as far as your options go.
Oh.
So, and even growing up, you learn history. I didn't know about preservation as a field until I got to grad school. So I think it's important for you what you mentioned about just being open to a lot of different things.
Yes.
I think that serves a lot of us well just in life, but I think that's great advice.
The advice I used to give to my students was say yes to every opportunity and you'll be shocked what happens.
Absolutely. And volunteering, I think.
And volunteer.
Because you might not always get paid doing the work, but if you can volunteer and find other fields that you can kind of get experience in, I think that's really important.
Yep.
So
I agree.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. John Kvach, for joining us here today. We are so excited to talk to people in our community that are doing the work of history, of preservation, and beyond, just all sorts of different projects going on in our area. If you're interested in following along with our Preservation Month activities, please follow the Huntsville Historic Preservation Commission on social media. We're on Facebook and on Instagram at Huntsville Preservation, and we look forward to participating and celebrating with you throughout the month of May.